get free vouchers.
Hello and welcome. You have tuned into In Your Interest here on News 9 Live. I'm Krishnakumar and the big story on the show is, will GST rates in India go up to 35%? Now, in the latest, the group of ministers, we have gotten together to raise interest rates, GST rates, but to 35%. The council meeting scheduled to happen this month on the 21st of December. However, prior to that meeting, the group of ministers is playing a pivotal role in shaping policy recommendations. It has made many suggestions. It has proposed a staggering 35% GST rate that can be applied to items that include cigarettes, tobacco and related products, pan masala and even aerated beverages. If accepted by the GST Council, the 35% rate will be a new addition to the existing 4-tier tax slab structure. Currently, tobacco products already face a hefty tax burden of 28%, bear in mind, coupled with an additional cess. Not just that, the group of ministers also recommends a major rejig in the textile sector. It is likely to propose a tax rate tweaks on 148 items to the GST Council, including packaged water, leather bags, luxury watches, shoes, bicycles, ready-made garments and more. Let's understand what does it mean for India to have its goods and services tax at 35%. We have Mr. Ritesh, Kanodia, partner, Aurtus Consulting, Indirect Tax Advisory and Litigation, now joining us. Ritesh, thank you so much for taking time out to be here on In Your Interest. You know, we are talking about GST rates at 35% at a time when the GDP rate has come at less than 5.5%.
So, GST at 35% is not going to be a general phenomenon. I think we need to understand the basics of why this is being proposed, the thought process, sorry, not the basics. So if you would know that there was a compensation cess which was existing at some point in time, and the compensation cess ends on March 2026. So the government has been sort of thinking on, with respect to certain goods, which they call it as sin goods, and cigarettes come within that category. How do they levy that additional GST that they've been collecting? So if you talk about cigarettes, for example, the compensation cess ranges from 5 to 36%. So the base rate is 28%. And then there is a cess which ranges for 5 to 36%. Like for on tobacco, the cess goes up to 160%. And if, let's say, the compensation cess regime ends, then how do they sort of incorporate this and collect this from the end user? And I think the thought process, and if you remember in the 54th GST Council meeting that constituted this GoM to deliberate on how do we integrate compensation cess into the normal GST rate. At the same time, there was this discussion around certain essential commodities, like for example, packaged water, which I think today is at 28%, and packaged water is not a sin commodity. So how do they bring it down to a lower rate? So this entire rejig is happening from that perspective, so that the government does not lose revenue. Let's say tomorrow there is a decision which is taken that compensation cess cannot be levied. Let me also tell you one more aspect. There is still a discussion going on whether the compensation cess can be extended. And that has been referred, I think, internally to their law committee, etc., which decision has not yet been taken. So the decision of 35, it's not that, yes, a new slab will mostly be added, which is not there till date. But in my view, the slab should be restricted to purely sin commodities and should not be levied as a general rate of tax. That's the understanding as of today.
Right, even by sin tax standards, 35% is a big number. That's the reason why you're seeing the social media chatter around it. And you're talking about very basic goods that people consume a lot, like aerated beverages, like apparel. Apparel in excess of 10,000 rupees, attracts 35% GST, and less than 10,000 rupees, but above 1,500 rupees, still attracts about 28% GST. The rates are already high on some of these most consumed products.
I think the discussion and the debate is what is sin. right? So is all luxury a sin? So today, for example, if I'm wearing a shirt which is above a particular price or buying a watch, right? Will you call that as a sin? And yes, that's where a disconnect is, because the idea of GST was to sort of make it simplified. And now what is happening is there is one more new slab which is coming in. And what we have, earlier the philosophy was when 28% was introduced, the thought was remove as many possible products from 28 as possible. And we saw a trend where 28 was being reduced, right? Earlier, a lot of even 84, chapter 84, which is machinery, etc., were under 28%, which gradually moved to 18%. We have now suddenly seeing a reverse trend where a lot of products are now moving not to 28 but to 35. Yes, that's not really something which should have been done. The government should have thought through on some other mechanism of revenue enhancement instead of compensation sets. Adding a new slab, without commenting into what is sin, whether cigarette is sin, whether watches is sin, whether clothes are sin, it complicates the entire GST structure. So the idea was to sort of have, in fact, the thought was to rationalize merged slab rates. So there was this discussion around merging 12 and 18, but it doesn't seem that's happening. So yes, it's a debatable question. What do you call it as sin? Is every luxury a sin? Is the question.
Yeah, the debate around what is a sin, if are aerated drinks sin, or in that sense, cigarettes and aerated drinks are both, harmful to public health, so it is more punitive taxation.
Okay, my thought is.
And by the way, the fact that we are putting aerated beverages and cigarettes is very new.
Aerated beverages were always under 28%. Now, yes, the enhanced rate of tax would really impact the industry in a large way. As I said, it's an individual discussion on what you call as sin. I would not want to comment on that. I don't drink cigarettes, so I'm not an impacted consumer. But I didn't drink aerated beverages. I'm an impacted consumer. But without getting into sin and non-sin, the question is it the right time to tinker with the slab rates, bring a rate of tax which is as high as 35%, and we already have 4 slab rates. So you're just further complicating the GST structure. Was there a better way to sort of handle this? And I agree to your point to say is aerated beverages a sin, though. Yeah, somebody may say it has a health impact, etc. But then aerated beverages may have multiple facets, right? You may have something which might have a health impact. You may have something which is actually a health drink, but still falls within the category of aerated beverages. So those are, I think, questions which will get debated. And this is not a final decision. This is just a news item. So I think we just need to see how it evolves.
We need to see how it evolves, but this entire slabs have always been revised and redone time and again. I'd like your thoughts on how we are going about it in terms of GST. It has been through so many ups and downs in its own way, and yet continues to soldier on. And with these kind of inordinate hikes, doesn't it come across as something that's as too much of an imposition on the public?
No, you're absolutely right, because see, every change has a lot of consequences. So let's say, for example, today they change the rate to 35%. So there is a stock which is already lying in the market. That is number one. Number two is there is an entire IT system rejig that they will have to do. They'll have to change. Today, for example, the way my invoicing would have been structured is that there is a tax rate and there is a compensation cess. Now I will have to merge. I will have to maybe create new slab rates, etc. So it really takes a lot of effort to sort of implement all of this, and therefore that is where I was saying that a new slab was not advisable. It creates challenges for the industry. You first have a thought process of bringing products out of 28. Now you are moving to 35. So yes, what you're saying is right, that they should have really not introduced a new slab rate and maybe some other mechanism to see. The entire philosophy of compensation was to, compensate states who would have lost revenue, right? And there are states which are actually doing good under GST. There are states which are losing revenue, but that was always the consequence of GST. And when initially it was decided that the compensation would be for 5 years, which again got extended by some 4 years to 2026. I think somewhere there had to be a stoppage, but it seems that's not happening. even though GST is really giving robust revenues, we still see, tax rates and tax rates getting increased. Though there is also a reduction on essential products and commodity. I'm not saying it is one-way traffic. Yeah, but it complicates things.
Especially, when you have, insurance, health and term insurance premiums, getting 18%, there is no resolution for on that end as well.
Yeah, so I think there would be some notification in the next GST, after the next GST Council meeting, where below 5 lakhs and senior citizens probably, and I'm not saying necessarily, probably are going to be exempted. But what they believe is that whoever takes an health insurance above 5 lakh is again liable to be taxed at 18%. Let me tell you, the consideration is, of course, the revenue loss. Nobody is ready to forego that revenue which is coming out of insurance. And to be honest, 5 lakh amount on an insurance is nothing, right? Today, in today's world, 5 lakh is a very small component. So yes, maybe the focus is to say that let the lower class, the lower middle class who only takes an insurance of 5 lakh, or let's say there is a value cap, is subject to a lower rate, but otherwise everything sort of goes under an 18% rate. Term insurance, at least, they should have considered it, because it's basically life. Even income tax doesn't tax proceeds out of term insurance. But we'll see some exemption in the next GST Council meeting on senior citizens, and I think a value below 5 lakhs.
Right, and I'm asking this question, having this conversation to you on behalf of the Indian middle class, which is continuously already been talking about the tax burden. They pay nearly 40% in income tax, and on top of that come all these indirect taxes, on the different products that they use, and invariably, all that the Indian middle class uses, be it a salon or be it an SUV, all of that, are the ones which are in the highest tax brackets somehow.
Yeah, see if you see the trend, right? Now they've started bifurcating products into luxury and non-luxury. So watches, for example, they believe aerated beverages also consumed by higher class. That is the trend which is evolving. But somewhere I agree to you that it is also impacting the middle class. So for example, car is today attracting a big amount, 43% compensation at the lowest model, and the rate is quite high, right? Now,
the SUV can be a mid-size SUV, can be a compact SUV. So, the smallest SUV, 10 lakhs or under, also will end up attracting nearly 50% in GST plus cess.
53% to be exact. Yes. And see, you would also probably see a rate rejig there if tomorrow compensation cess is getting withdrawn. Because the question is, can the government bring down the 53% to 28%? Seems very unlikely. So there are revenue considerations which is playing out sort of, and the revenue has to come from somewhere. So it seems the approach the government has adopted is that let's tax the rich guys whom they believe would be the consumer of such products like expensive watch. So if you see again, bringing monetary limits, right, above a particular value, above etc., further complicates this entire structure. We had gone through this in the past. Now, let's say watches above 25,000, I can see that on your screen. Now, let's say if I sell a watch for 24,500, and those kind of litigations will now start coming in. Why do we want to complicate it so much? Now, the different structures for a watch which is below a particular amount, above a particular amount. I don't think so that was a desirable GST. We wanted to make it simple, a simple slab rate, etc. But now it seems we have seen too many diversions in terms of slab rates, in terms of value limits. That's where the challenge is.
Okay, if Ritesh, at this stage, if I were to ask you at this next GST Council meeting, which is set for the 21st of December, what do you think should be the top priorities for the GST Council at this stage?
According to me, the next meeting would be more focused on the budget-related changes. Let's say if there are any nuances which are to be addressed, I think that could be one point of discussion. The other thing which I see is insurance would, of course, find a mention in the next GST Council meeting. And the rate rationalization, I don't think so there will be a conclusion in the next meeting, because the report is yet to be received. The earlier due date was 31/12/2023. I don't think so that has still been finalized. And on certain aspects, like for example, whether they can continue compensation cess as per the newspaper reports, a legal view is still pending of whether legally they can extend, etc. So I think the next meeting would be sort of a presentation to present the new GM would present in terms of what is their thought process, multiple options, alternatives, and then I think the final decision probably could be near to the budget date or maybe along with the budget. So I'm not very sure whether they've agreed to certain rate changes on certain products. Maybe see, cigarette is the most easiest thing to target, right? Because I don't think so. There is a doubt in the mind of the government that it is a sin product. So they will just go ahead with, making it 35%. They will have to clearly bring this in the budget. Because my understanding is they can't simply introduce a 35% slab without, bringing it in the budget. So that's where, while they may pass a recommendation and meeting purpose is because the budget is going to be coming nearer. So that's what I broadly see is going to happen.
All right, we will leave it at that. Ritesh Kanodia, partner, Aurtus Consulting, Indirect Tax Advisory in Litigation. Thank you so much for taking time out to be with us here on In Your Interest. On to the other big story we are tracking here on In Your Interest, and we're trying to get a grip on, and that is Trump's tariff wars and what it will mean for India. While US President-elect Donald Trump is yet to officially take charge, his tariff wars have begun already. Trump had earlier announced that he would sign an executive order imposing a 25% tariff on all Mexican and Canadian imports, as well as an additional 10% tariff on Chinese goods on the first day of his administration. And now it looks like Trump is planning to target the BRICS bloc of nations, that's Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, including India definitely. Donald Trump has warned BRICS nations against creating an alternative to the dollar. In a recent social media post, Trump threatened a 100% tariff on goods from BRICS nations. As a result, the Indian rupee has hit a record low against the US dollar. It has recovered a little bit today, but still wallowing in the depths. But there are also other factors weighing on the rupee. Bear in mind, another contributing factor is the GDP numbers of the second quarter, which came out were weak. These numbers showed India's growth slowing to 5.4%, the lowest in 7 quarters. So what do Trump's tariff wars in this context mean? We have Subhomoy Bhattacharjee, author and contributing editor at the Business Standard, now joining us live on the broadcast. For more, Subhomoy, thank you so much for taking time out to be with us over here. We are yet to get to the official inauguration of the new president of the United States of America, and already the markets are feeling the jitters.
Yeah, markets would feel the jitters, but I'm not that worried about the currency. Let me put it this way. Currency movements are more, fluctuations that happen, the immediate fluctuations have more to do with immediate factors, like oil demand, demand for sudden exports, sudden imports and things and all that. Often those have much more impact, and rightly so. The fact that the president-elect of USA has said that he'll impose 100% tariffs and all that, that really isn't much in terms of saying, because first of all, dollar occupies 90% of the world trade volume. Indian rupee doesn't even figure in the, say, about 1% or so. So for in the Indian rupee, it's not an issue, definitely. It also is not something that, even if you look at as BRICS currency, that's something that has been talked about, and that will be long decades and will take lots of, what I should say, substantive changes in the world economy. So when I mean that the nature of the trade between, say, India, Russia, even say China, Brazil and other countries will have to take off in a big way. That will take time. Those are many years through which those changes will happen. What is of concern to India is that the Indian rupee's internationalization should not get affected, and I don't think that is getting affected. So the drop in the value of the rupee is, I would seriously discount it as anything that because Mr. Trump has said it, so therefore the rupee could be in a free fall. That doesn't happen like that way. About the GDP, which you mentioned, yes, the fact that Indian GDP has come off, the growth rate has come off from a high is a cause for concern. as you know very well, the rupee or any currency is essentially a measure of a country's GDP. So if the GDP is increasing well, if it's doing well, then obviously the currency does well. But by that reckoning, every time the Indian GDP has grown up, in the last quarter it went up by 7.2%. Did the rupee follow suit? No, it did not. So why isn't so? Because again, as I said, the movements in the currency reflect different factors which are more long term. The immediate fluctuations represent short term demand for respective currencies, which the currencies respond to. So that's where I'll stop. Yes, Krishna.
Right, sure. We're having this conversation because these are times that are extremely volatile, and you never know what Trump will do when he, what he says, how much of it will, he will end up doing. There's so much uncertainty surrounding it. But the question here is, when you have a clear tariff war being declared, and it's not just the BRICS nations. One of the first things he spoke was about the tariffs on Mexico and Canadian products, and then China is obviously, there's going to be a hike in tariffs on Chinese imports as well. But the point here is that what will it mean for Indian exporters? India's export industry, which is already facing enough and more of its challenges, will again find it more difficult.
Well, not so. A tariff definitely creates problems, but of course we'll have to see what sort of tariffs are imposed on Indian products. Trump is more interested that India lowers tariffs on imports from USA. And remember, the big tariff issue, or rather the big trade between India and USA is not of products like a motorcycle or anything, colorful as they might look. It is oil and gas. India and USA's biggest trade volume is in oil and gas, and those work on different principles. There's no tariff issue there. So we should be aware of that is where, demand from a country like India, which is rapidly growing, is actually very good, and USA wants to muscle in that market. In USA wasn't in that market till 2017. Trump actually created in his first presidency in pressure on India to buy gas from the USA, and India and USA has rapidly climbed up the charts. So those imports would rise. As far as your question on exporters having problem, devaluation is actually beneficial for a country. When the currency of a country goes down, it helps the exporters. Remember, for a small and medium export units, a cheaper rupee means that per unit they can sell much more abroad. They become much more competitive. So actually it counters against the discomfort that they have in India of lots of other things that we always talk about. But a softer rupee actually would help our exporters. And that's a fundamentally useful thing to happen. A stronger rupee might be good for chest thumping, but it doesn't do anything to help exports, which is why a rupee, if it actually goes down, it will help. If you look at the real effective exchange rate of the rupee against other currencies, which is what we call the real, you will see that Indian's rupee is still overvalued. That's not good for our efforts when we are trying to export to different countries. We want cheaper currency, and that cheaper currency actually helps. To score political points, a better rupee actually helps. Stronger rupee actually helps the upper class. When they go out as tourists, when they would like to exchange the Indian rupee at a better rate against the pound or the dollar. But they are not the big ones. What we are looking at is for the people in the middle income, lower income bracket. And for those entities, when they are exporting, a softer rupee means enormously major possibilities. Yes, Krishna.
Right, Subhomoy Bhattacharjee there joining us with that perspective, author and contributing editor at the Business Standard. Thank you so much, Subhomoy, for taking time out to be with us here on this edition of In Your Interest. And with that, we are completely out of time here on the show. Thank you so much for watching. This is Krishnakumar signing off.
Bayern München against Bayer Leverkusen.
Musiala!
The record cup winners against the current holders.
Oh, it's magnificent!
It was a Bayern triumph in 2020 when they met in the final.
Alaba!
Bayern lifted the trophy.
Napoli with a chance, 2-0. Radetzky makes a hash of it.
Despite Sven Bender and Kai Havertz's goals, Bayern were too strong.
Lewandowski just dinks it over the keeper. Kai Havertz, audacious shot.
The record cup winners were victorious again. Bayern won 4-2, another trophy for Bayern. Revenge is in the air for Leverkusen.
Patrick Schick! It has come to Sané!
Who will get through to the next round? Will it be Bayern or will it be Leverkusen?